Your value comes from who you are, not what you've done, and not your results. And on today's podcast, I have a dear brother of mine, a friend who is one of the most incredible men and entrepreneurs that I know, that I'm inspired by, who just constantly blows my mind. And if you're watching this on video, I have an orange piece of construction paper in front of me because I wrote 2 pages of notes during this show. It is the most jam-packed, value-packed episode when it comes to entrepreneurship, the ups and downs, your intrinsic value versus the value you bring to the world, focusing on the gain that you've made in your life instead of the gap ahead of you, how entrepreneurship isn't linear. I can't even, I have to just give context to this. This isn't even like a structured intro because there's so much to unpack. And I was so moved by this show that I can't think of anybody who would listen to this that wouldn't benefit from it. But I'll just give you this little summary of his story. He was a dad at 20 working in a post office who then started and joined an MLM with his wife where he quit his job and they had no money, no skills, and started handing out flyers at the mall to try to build their business, was reset to zero and lost the money again, ended up moving into a basement, picking up odd jobs and thinking his life was over, till he was actually starving himself and not eating. He was riddled with guilt and shame and fear. Then he eventually went back to the post office and in that job ended up finding a new full-time job, working 16 to 20 hours a day, became a manager. Then he became one of the youngest managers in a Fortune 500 company. And then his wife said, or God spoke to him, said, I need you to leave that job, to where he basically became an entrepreneur again, started and built another $1 million business with his wife, and then hit reset again and then rebuilt it all and is now crushing and having the best months and lives and entire journey of his career. We talk about what real work actually means, how to focus on the things that work and ignore the rest, how we should turn our stretching into a standard, how you should sell it before you're ready and sell it in public, how your past self would be proud of your current self and you're standing in your past self dreams, how to develop yourself for others to win, not yourself, the power of zooming out and changing perspective, and how a driving instructor gave him the absolute best entrepreneurial advice he's ever had, and so much more, because that's only half the pages of notes. And so this one is one of those ones where I want you to buckle your seatbelt, get ready, and I cannot wait to hear what your takeaways are from this episode. So without further ado, let's get into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mine and George Show. Today, I am stoked, I'm honored, I'm humbled to be joined by, I would call him my new BFF, but it feels like we've known each other forever. But it's like my brother in Christ, a man who had me on his podcast. We connected on Instagram, and he's done nothing but speak into me to be of utmost service. And as time has gone on in a very short, compressed time, I realized that this man is a master of many things, has an incredible story, is an incredible husband, just an incredible human, and understands the world of entrepreneurship, the world of digital marketing. And every time he speaks, he listens. And truthfully, he's also been a lifeline for me where I'm like, hey, I need some love. Can you send me a prayer? Can you speak into me? Can you make an intro? And so I am honored. I'm excited. I don't know what other words to use to describe him besides just I don't know. He's good looking. He's funny. He's smart. He's intelligent. He's connected. He's value-based. He cares about people. He does all the right things for the right reasons. He has a giant backbone and just stands for what he believes in, and it only benefits everybody around him. So I'm honored, I'm humbled, and excited to be joined by my friend Steven. So Steven, welcome to the show.
George, thank you so much for having me. I was not expecting to try to fight back tears immediately at the beginning of this podcast.
It's what I do, man. It's like love bombs. It's like love bombs. I'm just okay, I've spent enough with tears in you anyways on the other side. And I'm so here we go. And he also has his own podcast and a ton of stuff that I'm sure we're going to get into. But to get this kick started the right way, right before we hit record, I was like, hey man, I think this is where we're going to start. And Steven spent, I don't know, about 5 minutes giving me a story and speaking into me and sharing something that's so powerful and so profound. And I think is so prevalent right now, just given the state of the world and 2025 and entrepreneurship. And it has to do with value. And I can't even introduce it well enough, but we were talking about intrinsic value versus external value. And so Steven, I kind of want to give you the soapbox, and I want you to just take it as your TED talk. Let's just give everybody a mini TED talk when it comes to value and the things that you were sharing with me.
Oh, nice. I've got 3.5 minutes in if it's a TED talk. But all jokes aside, when I think about value, it's for me, it's for you, it's for everyone. especially when we look at Instagram, it's easy to put our value in other places and other things than who we actually are and the experiences that we have. And it's fascinating. There's a person that I know that they've done over $30 million in sales, and they've been around for over 20 years in the industry. And I've been talking to them, and they said, Stephen, I just don't know what I have to offer. And that blows me away, that somebody who has made that kind of money, who has had the life experiences that he has had, doesn't see the value in what he has to offer. He's afraid that people won't even spend $500 on him. And
Mm.
what is so fascinating is I told him, I said, I will give you $500 every day and twice on Sunday if you can show me how to make $30 million. And this is something, whether you are working in a job for 30 years or you've made $30 million, you have experiences for somebody that is behind you. This is something that I've realized is everything that we're chasing, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're listening to this and you're growing your company, is you feel like, especially in the beginning, it's like, well, I'm doing this to put food on the table. I'm building something so my kids can have this, can inherit it. But if you can shift the focus off of you and realize everything you are creating, everything that you're doing, everything that you are becoming is for the people behind you, you realize that that is where your value really is. What I've found is that everything that you learn, even if you're one step ahead, you can turn around and show somebody else. And when you can change the perspective off of, oh, well, I'm not there yet, so I have nothing to give until I get there, you realize that you have so much to give because you got here. If I bet you that there's dreams, that there's goals, that there's ambitions that you had 5-10 years ago, that old you would be so proud of you now. But we get so stuck in looking at, well, I'm not where I thought I would be. I'm not as far as I want to be, that we miss all the little golden nuggets that we've acquired over time that somebody else could use to shortcut them 10 years. So that's been my soapbox for the past couple of weeks, because when people start talking about what they've done, the values, the experiences that they have, and they're able to give that to the world, that's what makes us better as human beings and makes us better together. Because now I'm able to give you what I've experienced. You're able to give me what you've experienced, because none of us are created the same. We're all created intrinsically different. So if that's the case, even if we've done the same exact things in the same exact industry, we're two different people. So the way you've done it is going to be different. So it's just amazing. I'm just so grateful for you, because I'm able to see you and talk to you, and just the value you've been able to pour into me, and the person that you are gives me value. It's not what you've done for me or my company or any of those things. It's literally how you show up. It's literally how you loved on me with those love bombs. That is value.
I love that. Yeah, it actually reminds me of like one of my favorite books, The Gap and the Gain
Mm,
by Dan Sullivan. I think they rewrote it and Benjamin Hardy focused on it, but all too often we get stuck. We get these progress points in our life. And like, to your point, like we're standing in our former self's vision. Like at
yeah.
this point, like we're standing in something like we dreamed about in every single bucket. It doesn't matter if it's your finances, your health, your family, your business, like your friendships. And then when we get to those peaks, we realize there's many, many more peaks ahead of us, but we get stuck focusing on the gap ahead of us instead of just taking a minute to turn around and like look at the gain that we've
Yep.
made and look how much progress we've made. And like the way that I've collapsed this in my brain is like, I always use running as an example, because if you think about it, like if you haven't run ever in your life and you go run a mile, you might run that mile in like 15, 16 minutes or 20 minutes, right? But after like a year of consistent running, you're probably running it in like 10 minutes or so. And then it might take another year to get it down to like 9 minutes. But when you get down to like 6 minutes or 5 minutes, you might spend 4 years running aggressively and working harder to knock like 10 seconds off
Yep.
or 20 seconds off. And I think about like Olympics, like Olympic runners, like 100-meter sprinters who they've worked for 20 years to run like a 10.4, and then they'll work for 8 more years to get it down to like 10.3, because like even the more and more progress you get and the closer you get to that vision of yours, the time it takes to achieve the next step can feel insurmountable, but it doesn't discredit all of the progress that has been made. And so I love like your take on that. And so with that being values, I think what I hear underneath it as well is like the undertone. And I've definitely felt this before. I've felt this in this season right now of like, things get hard or they're
Mm-hmm.
changing because it looked a certain way. And then the imposter syndrome creeps in, right? So like, how do you navigate that? Or how do you help your friend navigate that? Because you also helped him go from like, I have no value to add to like, oh my God, I totally do. Like, what do you
Yeah.
focus on in that bucket?
I love this because I'll just use me. So literally 4 months ago, About, yeah, 4 months ago. We were at a spot where I didn't know if we were even going to be able to have a Christmas. Yeah, we had some clients, but it just wasn't good, right? Like we just weren't in a spot where we were able to do anything more than just get the bills paid. And I'm sitting there and I literally turned to my wife and I just said, we're going to have the best Christmas we've had since 2021. For reference, 2021 is when we were making over $100,000 a month. So way different than 4 months ago. So there was nothing intrinsically that said that that was going to happen. But what ended up happening was because I changed my goal, I got out of my own way and I started focusing on how I was helping others and just honestly figuring out what real work meant to me. Because at that time I thought I was doing everything that it took to do work, but I really wasn't. Like there was a lot more I could do. For me, what I've realized is you just got to get out of your own head. And that's so much easier said than done. But getting out of your own head to me looks like, okay, what have I done in the past? Okay, I need 10 clients, but I only have one client. It's like, how are you showing up for that one client? Because if you're out of alignment with who you say you are, it's going to be really hard for you to have confidence to help anyone else. So if you say, oh, you know what, this is my last Dorito I'm going to eat, and then you eat 20 more Doritos, your mind's going to be like, hey, I can't trust this man. I can't trust his word. But if you say, you know what, I'm going to help my clients are going to see great results. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to help them accomplish whatever XYZ goal is. And you go all out. And going all out means that you might have to go learn something. This is something that I've figured out. Is like you might actually have to go take a course to help your client, not even to help you. You might have to go watch YouTube videos. You may have to go get a mentor, read a book, do whatever it is. But when you start developing and working on yourself for others instead of just yourself, all of a sudden it's easier for you to just focus on something else because it's easy. And I'm actually going to use another story from my life, which is it's easy to pay attention to what's right in front of you. So before I transitioned to that story with my client, the way I was able to help him, because I know that you asked that, was for him is I said, man, look, he just had his 60th birthday yesterday, and he was really, really self-conscious about that. He feels as if he's on the back half of the hill, right? He feels like he's going on the downhill slide. He doesn't feel like he had a lot to give. He was really nervous about going into this year. And I just told him, I said, dude, you've made over $30 million in sales online. I said, I've never done that. I said, you've been in the industry for over 20 years. I said, you're so much further down the road than you think you are. I said, there's things, it's like, I can understand the same business as you, but I only look at the business and the cycles of the business. You're looking at the cycle of an entire industry, and you've been through it a few times. So you can let me know when I start looking at it, it's like, man, the ROAS on this is really, really bad. The cost to acquire a customer is really, really bad right now. You could say, well, it's fine. You're just in one of these seasons, and you're in a bear market and it's about to be a bull. You'll be fine. Like, just keep going. And that's easy because you have a zoomed out expertise. For me, is I'm stuck in the micro. So for him, and this is where zooming out and also having mentors, reading books, going through these different people's story makes it easier for you to zoom out. And so for me, one of the best pieces of advice I ever received came from a driving instructor. So I don't know about you, but for me, I was terrified to drive. I was not the kid who's like, yeah, I can't wait till I turn 16 to get a driver's license. I was never that kid. I never wanted to drive. I always thought I was driving like a missile and I was going to blow somebody up every time I was on the road. But I remember very, very well, it was so bad that my parents had really tried to, take me to drive and try to teach me how to do all these things with driving. And I just couldn't do it. I just didn't like it. So what ended up happening, they stuck me in driver's ed. And I remember I had this driving instructor. One day we're going down the interstate and we're getting off on these exits and I'm just like slamming on my brakes time and time again. We're going through corners and I'll fly up on the corner and slam on my brakes and then go around the corner. And he said, Steven, do you know why you do that? And I said, no, please help me. And he said, well, the reason why you have to slam on your brakes every single time, he said, is because you're looking right in front of you. And he said, if you would look down the road, your brain can actually process more than you're giving it credit for. If you look down the road, your brain can process the cars that's in front of you, the curve that's coming up, the stop sign that's there, the obstacles that may be there, the potholes. He said, but because you keep looking down, you have to react every time. And he said, you're not being proactive, you're being reactive. And that piece of advice, at that time, I was like, oh, that's good. And it actually really helped me become a better driver. And now I'm actually an excellent driver because of that one piece of advice. But also I've realized that's the same thing in business. I mean, for me, being in this service-based industry now and helping different size brands, I noticed that they get so stuck in, it's like, well, we just didn't make sales today. Or it's like, oh, we only made this amount of sales and, I don't know how we're going to do it. It's like, let's expand. And you literally have a 5 return on ad spend over the last month. I'm pretty sure that one day will be fine. It's like, but you are so stressed about one day that you're missing everything else that's happened. So my advice to anyone listening, and you just feel so stressed, this is what happens when I get really stressed about a moment, is I zoom out and I look, okay, how's this week look? Okay, maybe I didn't close that client. I really thought I would. What does this week look like? Well, I've got 2 more sales calls this week. Okay, so it's still possible that what we need to come in can come in. Okay, let's look at the past month. Okay, let's look at to next week. So if everything goes wrong, I still have more things in the pipeline. I still have more things that could go right for me. Then all of a sudden, it's easier for you to go and relax and just keep moving forward. And that's one of the biggest things as entrepreneurs when it gets really hard is just keep moving forward. Because if you stop, that's when you quit. And when you quit, then there's no coming back from that. Like you've got to go restart all over again if you quit.
I love that. I like how a driving instructor gave the best advice, for the entrepreneurial journey. And it's the same for me too. You and I have actually talked about this personally, right? It's so easy when that external pressure starts to leak in. What it really changes is our perspective.
Yeah.
And in that perspective, it's like our measurement window becomes so small. Like even me, I forget sometimes, like I've been an entrepreneur since like 2010. And anything I'm facing right now, I've already actually faced,
Yep.
probably 300 times at this point. But when that pressure comes in, when the noise comes in, and then to your point, you just end up reacting to it over and over, you lose that perspective. And then typically for me, it's like something has to break or somebody has to like come kick me in the shins or give
Yes.
me like a love hug or a love bomb. And I'm like, wait, hold on. What am I doing? Because all that reactive stuff is like bringing more of it. But like when you zoom out and you just take, to your point, you just take a breath and you're like, got it. Like I'm also still in the driver's seat
Yep.
and there's actions and behaviors that can be done. It might not be instant, but it's really about finding that next course of action. Like I genuinely love that. And because you've alluded to it a few times, I think context is going to matter at this one. Like I personally know your story, right? From like the beginning to like, to your point, to getting up to where you were, to then walking away from it and the reasons why you walked away
Yep.
from it to now like rebuilding it. But for like everybody listening, can we kind of hear the hero's journey of
Yes.
Steven's entrepreneurial journey?
Yes. And before I jump into my hero's journey, there is one last thing I want to say just on if you're feeling stuck right now, one of the easiest ways, because you brought it up and I love it, is the people you surround yourself with.
Oh,
So
yes.
if you're in a really tough spot and you've surrounded yourself with people who are also in a tough spot and you're all just talking about how tough your spot is, it's going to be hard for any of you to climb out. You're all just crabs in a bucket. And if you
Yep.
don't
Mexican
understand that
crab pot, man.
reference, yeah. So crabs in a
Yep.
bucket is if one crab starts to climb out, then all the other crabs drag it back in because it's like, oh, you're not getting out of this. So what happens, and the thing is something I didn't understand for a long time was, okay, if I leave that friend group, I'm just going to cut them off, right? Like I'm never going to talk to them again. It's like, no, you can leave that friend group and still love them. You can still have interactions, but you can't allow them to influence your life anymore. You have to choose something else. This is where it's really good if you are stuck to go find a mentor. Maybe go find someone who they are definitely not stuck. And the thing is maybe you can't pay for that right now, but how can you go listen to podcasts? How can you go listen to YouTube and watch YouTube videos, or how can you do something that feeds you, that moves you away from who you used to be into who you want to become? But it's those friend groups. And if you can get blessed enough to just make some friends, which you can do that through LinkedIn. Like I've made so many friends just through reaching out on LinkedIn, just like, hey, you look like you're doing some cool stuff. So, hey, would you mind, hanging out with me for 5 minutes? And they're just like, okay, sure. And I've made some, when I was in my darkest times, being able to make one connection that would just say, hey, this is the one thing you need to do. That would help me eventually climb out of the bucket. And it's also just being okay knowing that, hey, these people, I love them. And it hurts that I'm not going to be able to spend as much time with them. But I promise you, you aren't helping them by staying in that situation. If you really want to help them, you got to go out and become everything that you want to become and everything that you feel you've been called to become. When you do that, now you can turn around and help the other crabs in the bucket, but you can't just be another crab in the bucket. You got to get out.
Yeah. And before you answer my other question, I think it's huge to say, because you were talking about LinkedIn, but you and I connected on Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram. Yep.
We literally had, I think I might have sent you a follower video, you responded, and then we connected, and then we did some videos back and forth, and then we did a call. We
Yep.
did the podcast actually first. And
Yeah.
then I was like, hey, man, is this weird to tell you that like I love you? Like I kind of love you. You're like, I've been praying for this. I'm like, me too. And then like we've gone back and forth. And just for everybody listening, truthfully, like I sent Steven a message in tears, I believe. And I'm like, this is coming up. I'm like, can you pray for me? Right. And I think just because I want to hit this point, I think to even tie the first, 15 minutes of this together, one of the other big downfalls is when you start to feel like that is the desire to self-isolate. right?
Yes.
And breakthroughs happen in community, and and I mean this, I get boiled, like angrily boiled, where the fact that like people think there's shame in having a rough season or getting a flat tire or any of it. And like, if you're feeling shamed for feeling that way, audit your friend group, like audit the
Hmm.
people that you're like taking advice from, because like the entrepreneurial journey is like a roller coaster through a minefield, and it's gonna happen. Like it's gonna happen no matter what. But like, it's okay to feel that way. And it's also okay to lean out. And I also want to acknowledge, like, sometimes it can feel like the hardest thing ever to reach out when you're having those thoughts or you're feeling upset or you're feeling overwhelmed. But there's so much power, number one, for you, and just being willing to take the step, but then also to be witnessed in it. Like, I've tried my whole career to make my Instagram like the safest place. I'm like, you can send me anything. And I'm like, I might not have the answer, but I'll listen to you and I'll like hear you and support you and do that. And like, even you do this with your
Yeah.
Instagram and like just connecting with people. But like, I just want to give everybody a permission slip right now. If I was a teacher, I'd have a pad in front of me. Like, it's a permission slip for like, for you to feel okay wherever you are. Like, there's no shame in it. There's no fault in it. There's no blame in it. If you're in an up season, celebrate it. But if you're in a down season, also celebrate it. And you
Hmm.
don't have to be alone in it. Right. And like, leveraging connection and community is like my biggest gripe with the internet and entrepreneurial spaces in general. It's like, oh, everyone just wants to pretend that their poop doesn't stink. No, like, everybody poops and it all stinks. And it's completely okay to be a human in this process. And so I just wanted to say that, because like, I know for me personally, like in navigating what I'm going through and rebuilding the
Hmm.
business, and it's great. Like, I'm grateful for everything I have, and it's on its way up. But also like the divorce and shame that's carried with it, or like going from, to your point, like when I was doing $500,000 months pre-COVID back down to zero. I remember that 3 week stint, and it was the hardest thing to tell my friends, because I was like, oh, they're all not going to be my friend anymore. Like, I can't believe it. But to the earlier point, I was tying all of my value and worth to the results that I created, not to who I was as a person. And they're like,
Yep.
hey, we got you. Like, what do you need? Or, yeah, like, here's a shoulder, here's a piece of advice, here's an intro. And some of them were like, we're in to help. But it was just like being witnessed in it, and also being okay with it is completely normal and completely fine. And also like, celebrated, like, be around people that celebrate your journey and don't make it look a certain way. Like, the whole journey is important. And I just think that that's like an important thing to say. And so
Hmm.
now,
Yeah, very important. Love
yeah,
that.
now let's get into the hero journey of Steven.
All right, sounds good. So, it's really interesting the way you put that all together, because it's going to flow pretty much seamlessly into my story. And man, I'll take it all the way back. So, my wife and I got married, 2014. Okay, no, 2013. We got married 2013.
Ooh, 12 years.
So
Whoop, whoop.
yeah, it'll be 12 years this year. So, and I just remember 2013 we get married. Our son comes along 2014 in March. So we got married in August. Son comes along in March. You can do the math. And so it is a very, we're both, I'm just turned 19. No, I just turned 20. She was 19. He comes along. She doesn't want to go back to work. I'm working for $13 an hour at the post office at the time. And I said, okay, that's fine, but you're going to have to do something, because we need both incomes. So she goes and she jumps into business. This was our first foray into business. It was an MLM. My mom introduced us to it. And I just remember she's working like 14 hours a day doing this thing, like growing a social media following. She goes from 0 to 10,000 followers on Instagram. And then all of a sudden she's making $500 a month. And I'm sitting here going to work every single day, 6 days a week. And I go, wait a minute, hold on, time out. You're making $500 a month working from home on the internet. And she's like, yeah. And I go, there's no way, like, this isn't real. And then so I just did the only logical thing a 20-year-old would do with a new wife and son. And I quit my job, and we had $500 to our name, and I had absolutely zero skills. And so we come home. I remember this so vividly. And this is why it's really important to tell your story and to have those people around you, because I remember I had these little flyers, right? So most MLMs, they give you a flyer. Well, at least back then they give you a flyer. Now it's probably a QR code or something. But I'm standing in the mall because I go, okay, where's the most amount of people I can talk to in a day? The mall. So I go to the mall and I'm standing there, and I literally go home after 8 hours talking to no one, because I was so petrified. I had no skills. I had no confidence in myself. So I didn't believe in the product. So I wasn't selling this thing. So there was absolutely, I produced nothing. I just remember going into coffee shops and sitting with old high school buddies. I was that guy that would call you up. It's like, if you get 5 people, and then They get 5 people, and then they get 5 people, we'll be rich. And so it literally in the matter of a month, it was about a month and a half. We went from where we're both in business to where we lost everything because $500 rent was way more than 500 the next month. So we lose everything super fast. I'd just gotten a new truck because I had been working in this job for a year and I was good. All of a sudden that truck's not feasible anymore. We have to sell the truck off. I at least get break even on that, which was nice. And so we moved into a basement. We had some family members that were kind enough to let us live in their basement that was in the woods. So there was like these giant, have you ever seen Aliens? You ever seen the movie Aliens?
Yep.
So like the head crawlers off of those, the ones that jump on people's face. So there were spiders in the basement, I swear, were that big. I also don't like spiders, so I mean maybe it's just my recollection at this point. But there was these gigantic spiders, and this is why it's actually all coming together for me right now. It's very interesting. This is why I talk about value so much. Because I'm in this basement, I'm not doing the MLM anymore. My wife is still trying to figure it out. And I'm doing odd jobs, and I'm sitting there and live in this basement. I won't go upstairs. So it gets to this point where I at 20, and this is why I talk to people all the time about values. At 20 years old, I thought that my life was over. I thought I had failed. I was never going to come back from it. There was many times I contemplated suicide. I'm sitting there. It gets so bad at one point where we went to, I think it was Kroger. We get the clearance carrots. We're sitting there grinding them up because we can't afford baby food. I'm sitting there trying to feed my son. He won't eat it. He's crying. I'm upset at him. I'm upset at and really me being upset at him is me being upset at myself. I feel like I'd failed as a father, as a husband. And it got so bad that I just stopped eating. Like it got to a point where I stopped eating altogether. My mom had given me this box of Nature Valley Crunch bars. The ones you open, they just like fall apart as soon as you open them. So you lose like half the bar as soon as you open it. So that's what I lived on. That's what I had for lunch and dinner every day. So there was 2 in a pack. I would have one for lunch and one for dinner. And that's all I would eat. And it was and the thing is that the people who were housing us, they were also financially strained. They could barely pay their own bills before we moved in. So I don't know why they thought this, because they knew that we were moving in because we didn't have any money. But they thought that we'd be able to come in and help support them, and we couldn't. So they would prepare dinner for us every now and then. And I just wouldn't go upstairs and eat it because I felt so bad and I felt like I had nothing to give to them. So I just remember very vividly going through this space. And honestly, when I think about it live right now with you, the reason why I talk about value, the reason why I'm willing to talk about the good things and the hard things I've gone through is I'm talking to that 20-year-old kid who's still in the basement, where there's a 20-year-old kid that was just like me, who was sitting there contemplating taking his own life, who has a wife and a new son and is thinking there's no way out for me. And I am here to tell you there is. Just keep moving forward. Just keep going, because eventually the doors will open. And maybe it'll open the way mine did. I remember I ended up going back to the post office. I'm working part-time, and I hate this job, but it's not terrible. It's like, it's paying the bills. We're starting to get an okay amount of money, but my shifts are up and down. Sometimes I have a shift, sometimes I don't. And I remember coming home one day, walking into this basement, my wife's sitting on the bed right in the middle of this basement. And she goes, "Steven, I applied you for a job." And I go, "Okay, that's great. What is it?" She said, "It's a full-time job. It's got benefits. It's, $15 an hour," which was the most money I'd ever made at that time. And I go, I said, "There's no way." I said, "There's just no way." Because I grew up in a space where my parents told me you had to go to school, or you had to know somebody to be able to, and you had to have the experience to even get the job. I had none of those. So I went, "There's no way I'm going to get that job. Like, I'm not even going to get an interview for that. I don't even understand why you did that." And at this time, we were not close to God at all. And she said, "I don't know what it is, but I just feel like you're going to get this job." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And so sure enough, I get an interview, go into the interview. The guy's telling me that I'm better off eating glass than getting this job, but if I want it, I can have it. And I said, "Oh, well, I need this job, so let's do it." And so I end up getting the job. And pretty shortly after, we move into the house on the wrong side of the train tracks. It was like this little brick house, literally on the other side of the train tracks. And it was not great, but it was our own. And so we moved in there. This is shortly after my son's first birthday. And I'm sitting there and I'm going to this job every single day, and I hate my life. And I'm working, at that time, I'm working really 16 to 20 hours, 5-6 days a week. And it's a warehouse job. It's the hardest job I'd ever done in my entire life. And there was one moment that happened to me that changed everything, that changed my perspective. And that's why the perspective of a situation dictates a lot of how that situation is. I remember I'm sitting there and I'm just working super hard because I want to keep this job. So there's a standard that we have to keep, a certain quota we had to hit every single day. And I thought, well, if I crush that quota, then I won't lose my job. That was my only thought. And I told my wife this, as I said, I was doing everything it possibly took for me to make sure we never ended up in that same pain again. And also, just a foreshadowing is there's times when you come out of a hard season, like even for us, when we started coming out of a hard season, and then all of a sudden emotionally I just shut down. And she goes, "What happened to you?" And I said, "We will never be in the same pain again." And I said, and then I was able to reflect on this same season of my life and realize that what had happened was I had shut down everything else to focus on just being a hunter gatherer. It's like, I'm just going to go hunt. I'm going to go gather. I'm going to do everything I need to make sure my family's okay. But what happens, especially in this new day and age, if you become a hunter gatherer and you're not emotionally feeding your family, they're going to leave anyways. So that's almost what happened to us. My wife ended up having this she had an extramarital affair. We almost lost everything in that moment. But before we even got there, I just remember my boss at the time, he stopped me when I'm sitting there rolling through this warehouse. And he says, "Steven, I see how hard you're working." He's like, "Have you ever thought about becoming a manager?" Mind you, no one in my family had ever been a manager. And I went, "Not really." I said, "I'm just trying to work hard so I don't lose my job." And he said, "Well, here's the cool thing about this company." He said, "If you work hard the way that you're working and you're willing to learn," he said, "you can be a manager just like me," because I never graduated college either. And in that moment, it was possible for me. And that's when everything changed. I was working 16 hours a day. I would show up an hour early. I would leave an hour late. I was talking to everyone. I was learning everything possible. I was just consuming as much knowledge as humanly possible while still outworking everyone else. And that translated into basically me being this emotionally dormant person. And then after everything happened to my wife, I remember I'm sitting in my truck. So I don't know, I have a thing with trucks. So I ended up spending way too much money on this truck. And I'm sitting there in this beautiful truck outside of the house on the wrong side of the train track, so you can see what my priorities were. We did not upgrade the house. The living situation was still trash, but the truck was nice. And I'm sitting there, and I just remember my wife runs out because I had my son in the back. He's 2 at the time, and we're done. Like, I'm leaving. I'm not coming back because at that time it's like I don't need you anyways. It's like I'm making all the money. I'm bringing home all the money. It's like I'm good. Yeah, I'll just take my son. I'll go live with my parents. Like, he'll help me raise him. We'll be good. And I remember she ran out in front of the truck at 2 a.m. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her. And this is another one of those moments where the Holy Spirit just spoke to me. And this was before I was close to the Lord really at all. And he said, "You need her." And it was a moment in time where I just said, "I need her." And when we agreed, because she's like, "Just give me 2 years." I'm like, 2 years is a long time. Like, I want you to understand, we've been married for 2 years. Like, what am I supposed to give you? I'm supposed to give you double the amount of time. And I just said, okay, I agreed to it. I ended up selling the truck. Now, I have a thing with trucks, so I ended up just downgrading it into another truck. But we got a nicer place to live, so we did upgrade that part. But I just remember really, really soon after that, that's when I started flying up the chain at this company. I mean, I was a year and a half in one place, moved to Fort Worth, flew up the chain in 9 months. I went from basically being like a manager to this mid-market manager. I was over an entire location by the time I was 23. So I was one of the youngest managers in a Fortune 500 company. And I did it all without having any network when I walked into it, without having any kind of skills when I walked into it, without having any schooling. So I'm there. And then we circle back around 2018 is where the business journey picks back up. And my wife is a stay-at-home mom at this point, making enough money for her to do that. And she is also one of the hardest working, smartest people I know. And I knew that just inherently in my bones, I knew it wouldn't last long. But she ends up hating her life. She said, "There's only so much cleaning I can do and only so much Netflix I can watch." So she makes a post and she does like the cardinal sin and puts it up on social media about how bad her life is because she's a stay-at-home mom. And then luckily my mom reached out to her and said, "Hey, I'm doing this Amazon thing." So my mom she's been a serial entrepreneur for my entire life. And each one of those ventures has been wildly different than the other one. And that has inherently dictated some of her results. But she reaches out to my wife. She says, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. Let's get on a call." She gets on a call. She tells my wife, "Hey, do you want to do this?" My wife talks to me and I say, "Absolutely not." There's no way that I'm going to go back into business. I'm 5 years into this. Well, I was at that time 4 years into this company, and I am on the fast track I'm 23, 24 years old. I'm about to get another raise. We make $100,000 a year. And I'm going, that's like the golden standard and I went, why would we do that? It's like, we have the great life. And so eventually, of course, that Monday comes up, which a couple days later, and my wife says, "Yeah, I'm going to do it anyways." She does it anyways. And that was a fun experiment in how to be a husband because I just was super unsupportive. I was like the playbook, unsupportive husband. I was just giving her down the road all this stuff because I'm still working 14 hours a day. I'm still bringing home all the money. She's working. And what ends up happening, because she's not making anything. I don't understand business at that time. I just think, well, if you work as much as I'm working, you should be making more money than I'm making. I didn't realize that you got to be the CEO, the CMO, the COO, the CTO, the salesman, the chief salesman. You got to be the customer service, and you got to be the janitor. I didn't realize you had to be literally everything. And so what happens, I remember one day I come home, I worked 14 hours. She's up working. I go to bed. I wake up. She's up before me working. And I go, that means she had to have pulled at least 17 hours. And in that moment, again, it's just these little moments in life that everything changed. And I started helping her out around the house. I started being a much more supportive husband. And that didn't lead to us financially just gaining so much wealth. But what did happen was it gave her the freedom to push. So she went from someone making zero to then by the end of 2018, it was at so the end of 2019, actually, so a year later, it was $1 million business with 6 employees. It was like 13,000 transactions, something like that. And I had helped out a little. So I just like to throw that in with the rest of my stuff, but I helped out a little, but I was there and I was able to experience it. 10% profit margin. So just like atrocious. And my mom was the financial backer. She took like half. And then we also didn't know what we were doing. So then we just really didn't make anything on that. I was still making way more working in the corporate job. So I'm stay there. It's 2020. I'm helping them restructure because I'm a supply chain logistics manager. So I understand supply chain and logistics. And I also understand how to hire and fire people and how to train them. So I come in and I'm helping them restructure the entire company. COVID happens. And this was the worst time for COVID to happen because it's like, bro, could you not have done this like 3 months ago when I had everything in place? Like, sure, the profit margins would have sucked, but we'd have made a lot more money. But so when that happened, it's like, okay, we had just switched over the business model. We're doing a lot more wholesale, a lot more like retail arbitrage, doing a lot of stuff on Amazon. Then in May of 2020, so not many months later, I'm sitting there. There's a lot of my friends, family that are struggling to find jobs, and I'm having anxiety attacks for the first time in my life. So we've gone through this last 10 minutes together, me walking you through all these aspects of my life. Never had an anxiety attack in my life. I'm getting there, I'm showing up to work, and I'm literally crying because I'm having an anxiety attack. I can't breathe. And I remember very vividly one time on my way to work, I'm sitting there and I'm crying. At this time, I am getting closer to the Lord. And by closer, I mean, I'm just talking to him the way I'm talking to you. And I vividly remember, I said, Lord, don't take this away from me. I said, because this is a chance for my faith to be tested, because faith untested can't be trusted. It's a chance for me to build my endurance. And I remember walking in, I'm telling my boss, I'm sitting there talking to my boss, and I said, hey man, I'm literally having an anxiety attack right now. And he said, just push through, you'll be fine. I said, dude, I can't breathe. It's like, I can't function. And I'm sitting there crying in front of him. And he's like, oh, Steven, it'll be fine. It's like, this is the beginning of a 14-hour shift. And I'm going, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And I remember I walked out into the warehouse, and I'm sitting there with my guys, making sure that they're good. And then the 12 hours later, I'm standing in this mechanic shop. It's 2 a.m. And I walk in there and I'm just talking to the Lord the way I'm talking right now. And this is the only time in my life I feel like I heard the Lord speak to me plainly, like out loud. And I just heard, you're done here. And I was like, okay, somebody just walked in. It's probably my boss, and I'm going to get fired because I'm doing something I'm not supposed to. I look around, there's nobody. And I said, okay, Lord, if that's you, what am I done? I'm done with what? Like done being in here, done with what? And he said, you're done with the job. You'll never work a normal job again. So I went, okay. I went home and I told my wife, I said, hey, I feel like the Lord's telling me to quit my job. She said, if you feel like that's what he's telling you to do, you should probably do it. So again, this circles back around to having good community. At that time, earlier in 2020, I'd gone to this big conference. I'd gone to one of Tony Robbins' conferences. It was some big one that he does for business mastery. That's what it was.
Business mastery, yeah.
Yep. And so I went to business mastery. And then I met this one guy. He'd been in business for a decade by that time. And he and we had similar values. We were both Christians, and we exchanged phone numbers. And I hadn't really talked to him, but I call him up and I say, hey man, so this is what I feel like the Lord's telling me to do. I feel like the Lord's telling me to quit my job. What do you think? And he goes, hey, if the Lord's telling you to quit your job, then why'd you call me? And I went, that's not helpful. You're supposed to be helpful. You're supposed to be kind and supportive. And he said, no, in all seriousness, you didn't need to call me. You just need to listen. And I went, okay. So I went, put in my 2 weeks. I was like, one of the hardest things I've ever done. I remember the boss that I had at that time, he was begging me to stay on because we're going into the busiest season of my life, or busiest season of the company, which is in the summer. And I told him, I said, I can't, like, I got to go. And so I quit, went home. Amazon business that we're doing a lot of wholesale. We buy a $15,000 lot from a influencer who had built a couple of wholesale companies on Amazon. And that he sends that lot in 15 grand. And of course he bought it. The supplier said that he could sell it. We bought it from him. The supplier never said we could sell it. So we get shut down. We didn't know that we needed all that. So we end up getting shut down. They're holding $100,000 worth of our money. I have no income because I just quit my job literally 2 months ago. And so we're stressed out. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm sitting there crying, praying. I'm sitting there like literally holding up my journal like to the ceiling, just like, Lord, look at this. I wrote it down. You said I'd never work a normal job again. That was 2 months ago. What happened? And it's like, you could have easily left me in the job. And I remember my wife, she just saw a Facebook post from somebody that we followed at that time. And he was talking about Facebook Marketplace and how they just come out with shipping. And she said, Steven, we got all this inventory. We can't liquidate it. We tried doing all these things. What do we do? You want to just try this? And I said, well, we tried everything. We might as well. So we tried it. And this was at the beginning of September. So by the end of September, we made $5,000 profit. So we're like, oh, this is a thing. Like, this is actually real now. And then we ended up, by the end of 2020, we were able to support my cousin who had at that time a nonprofit helping underprivileged kids in Tennessee, specifically in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we were able to help him help 33 underprivileged kids in 6 months from starting it, which is, what is that? So 3 months is December. So by March, we were making $100,000 a month, which was just crazy growth. And then by the end of 2021, it's $1 million business. We were able to help 137 underprivileged kids have Christmas. We're able to, and this is like for real, helping them with $50,000 project. It's with these 137 kids. These are kids that were in the school system in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We went and talked to teachers, went to talk to these different administrators to make sure that, hey, these are kids that are in a hard spot. Like, they will not have Christmas if you don't do something. And so we came in, we had to set up a whole warehouse management system in our friend's basement to actually buy all these gifts, to wrap them all, to make sure it went to the right kids. And it was crazy. And it was beautiful. And then March of 2022, we are living in this nice house outside of Nashville, Tennessee. We have we have 2 short-term rentals at this time. We have 2 short-term rentals in Nashville, right on the strip. I mean, just beautiful property, right? And we're making most money we've ever made. We have a nice house. We have a home gym. We have a theater. We have all these things. And I remember my wife comes outside into the garage. That's where our home gym was. And I'm sitting there working out. She's crying. And she's just like, when it's as if somebody had passed away. And I went, hey, is everything okay? And she goes, no, I need to talk to you. And I went, okay, what's up? And she goes, the Lord said something to me and you're not going to like it. And I said, all right, hit me with it. He's been good. He's been more than faithful. Let's do this. And she goes, I feel like he's telling me to shut the business down. And I went, oh. I said, are you sure about that? It's like, we're doing $100,000 a month. It's like, we don't know how to do anything else. It's like, are you sure about that? And she's like, yeah, I feel like we're supposed to shut it down. So we end up shutting down that business. And it's not just as simple as just like, oh, we're just going to turn the website off. We're just not going to renew the domain anymore. We had 4 employees that were full-time with us. Like, we were making sure we were taking care of them. And because we were paying them well, they were taking care of their families. Like, some of these people were taking care of their moms and dads. And so what we did was we took all of our life savings, we put it straight into them, and we made sure that they were good. We helped them transition, find other jobs. And it was crazy because we immediately went from mountaintop. Then we had to liquidate an Airbnb that we had. The house we were in, we ended up having to move out of. We ended up, in the span of 90 days from that word that my wife received and me agreeing with, went from the most money we'd ever made to no money and living with somebody else. And I was like, how did we get here? And then over the span of time, we've just been sitting there working. There's been a couple different businesses that have happened over the span of that time. Elevatum is the one that we feel like the Lord has had us in, and we've actually really scaled up especially the past few months, and have just been blessed with a business partner along the way that's been able to speak life into me when I'm just like, I'm done. I'm just going to go get a job. And that's why you just got to find powerful community. But that is the 15-minute version of my entire life story. So the last 10 years of my life right there.
Okay. So what you're basically saying is that entrepreneurship is linear and predictable.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you're saying?
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, I have this dream and
and then it
It's
comes
gonna
true.
follow
Yeah.
this step. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah. You
Yeah.
go out, you talk to the first person you talk to, and they say, you know what, I actually used to have a dream like this working at the movie theater where I met my wife, where I was just going to be so nice and kind that somebody would just know and identify greatness in me. And they would say, you know, I've been looking for somebody just like you. Here's the keys to my Ferrari, and I want to give you a job that makes $1 million a year. And I was like, you know what, that's going to happen to me one day. And the thing was, I believed that at that time.
Bro,
And, you
your
know, I'm
dream
still waiting on it.
Your dream is better than mine because mine was I'm going to be such a good person. I remember I've never talked about this before, but you just brought it up and it's so funny because mine was like, I don't know how I'm going to make this. I'm just going to meet a billionaire one day and he's going to love me so much. He's just going to give me enough money to retire, like to be my friend.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Hey.
I had the same thing. Still waiting. I have friends that are billionaires. They've
Yeah.
yet to become my sugar daddy.
Yep. I'm
But at
waiting
that,
on them to write me into the will. I have an
yeah.
uncle.
Oh yeah.
He did really, really well with stocks. And so he worked in one job for like 50 years. And he took all of his money. He was single. He never got married, never had any kids. And he got given a home. He was always super frugal. He just put all of his money in the stock market and he became a millionaire. And realistically, let's be honest, though, he's a paper millionaire. Like he can't actually leverage that, even though everyone thinks he can. And that's just a difference in mindset and understanding how money works. But anyways, and so for a long time, because I heard that, I was like, man, I'm just gonna be super nice to him every time he comes over, and he's just gonna write me into the will, and then one day I'm just gonna wake up and have a few $1,000,000. I'm pretty positive I've not been written into that will. And this is just one of those things, though. Is like you can have those dreams. I don't think it's bad for you to have those dreams, especially if it's around you being a good person. Like, go be a great person because you never know. I think that being a great person has landed me a lot more clients than has lost me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is that maybe it happens. Maybe God just ordains somebody to come up and hand you the keys to your new car or to a new house. But it's going to be very, very rare for the majority of people that you're just going to be handed the opportunity that just changes your life.
Yeah. Yeah. 1,000%. I've actually just I've never heard anybody say that until you just said that. And I remembered like vividly when I used to like think that. And it was like when I was in the Marine Corps, I was hoping it would happen because I like literally was like, I can't do this
Yep.
for the rest of my life. Like I'm a decade in and then the Lord just blessed me. And he's like, well, you're done at year 13 and you're going to go figure out how to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, oh, well, there we go. That's even better. Dude, I not only was that, and by the way, it was more than 15 minutes just being integrity, but that was one of the best roller coaster rides that I've ever taken with anybody. Like I'm over here, I started sweating a little bit. I got goosebumps when you talked about your wife in the driveway. Like my whole body got chills. And I wrote like a full paragraph on my paper next to me trying to encompass that journey of like, okay, cool. So like maybe that is a TED Talk or a book or something along those
I've heard
lines. But
that. I've had a
I
few
can't.
people who have written books and who have done TED Talks. I have one lady where she said, "Hey, I've done multiple TED Talks like TEDx, and I've done a TED Talk." And she said, "You have all the making of that. Your story has that." She said, "Let me sit down with you and just help you do that." And I went, "Hey, that'd be fascinating." That time again, I didn't see the value in me, and I went, "Great." And then I turned into Casper and just never responded to her again. And it was like,
Well, and then to your point too, like I love that we started this podcast with value and like in so many of these moments, like there's like multiple roadblocks or mines
yeah,
along the way where basically it was a catalyst for you to find your value and realize that it's not in the results that you produce, but it's in who you choose to be. And
oh
so
yeah,
I have one question because
ooh,
you mentioned this early on before you told your story, but you mentioned this like term of like real work,
mm-hmm.
right? And then like now like hearing that, I'm like, okay, got it. Well, when you take that level of grit and determination and self-belief and you're like, it's not where I'm planted, it's that wherever I'm planted, I make sure I sow the seed and
Yep,
give myself the best chance of like growing. Like what is like real work to you? Because I feel like in entrepreneurship, quite frankly, what I see is I'm just going to say it, a lot of entitlement. Like if I
mm-hmm.
just post, they'll come,
Then
right?
they'll
Like
come. Yep,
Kevin Costner lied to you. If you build
mm-hmm.
it, they don't come,
No,
right? No, you have to go find them, build relationships with
yeah.
them, reinvent yourself. And you talked about so many things about that, but like, how do you define real work?
Yeah. So a couple different things is one, I mean, even Noah, when he built the ark, right? I mean, there's about to be the rain that wipes out the entire earth. Is God told Noah to go gather the animals two by two. That means that Noah had to go get them. He built it. They didn't come. He still had to go get them. So anyways, with that said, there's there's so many different things. It's all about, for me, it's about perspective and about pushing yourself. This is something I talk about, especially with the gym, because I mean, I love going to the gym. Been going to the gym for the last 8, almost 9 years now, and my body looks the best it ever has. Does that mean the last 8 years I've just done the wrong thing? It's like, no, I was just optimizing for a different thing. And I didn't know what it really meant to actually train to failure. Because the thing is, your brain is constructed to keep you safe. So you're going to hit a certain point where your mind's just going to go, you just can't do another rep. Like there's no way that you can push yourself past this point. And then you push yourself past that point, and then now your brain has a new standard for going, oh, wait, we actually can do that, and we're fine. We're not dead. Okay, great. So now we don't have to just tell him, hey, you can only do 5 reps. Like maybe he can do 8 reps because he just did 8 reps and he's fine. He's not dying. He didn't tear anything. He's not messed up. And so that's the same thing with business, is especially for newer founders. If you're doing less than $100,000, I mean, especially even if you're doing less than $1 million a year, even doing $1 million a year, what I realized was a lot of times in the beginning, the thing that helped us scale up really quickly is we just focused on the things that worked and we did not do anything else. So in the beginning for us, what really worked for us for our e-commerce brand was making sure our product was really, really good, making sure our customer service was, excellent, top notch. What that means is that we responded to everything. And by we, I mean is me, within 12 hours or less. So if somebody put in a ticket, and mind you, at one point we're doing 200 to 300 orders per day. So if somebody, and that means that's just orders. So that's us still having to process orders, still having to have this good sequence in place to let the customers know what's coming. But also that meant we had a ton of inquiries every single day. But those were the two aspects that in the beginning drove our business. Then over time, it was like, okay, how's the user experience? And can we work on CRO and do these different aspects of what everyone else says with customer service or with an e-commerce business? Can we work on doing more paid marketing? How do we optimize that? That's all great, but that wasn't what was moving the company. Well, the things that were moving the company, to most people, it's like, that doesn't even make sense, but that was what was moving the business. So we just focused there. Even in a service-based business, what I realized is, yes, you can sit there and make all these systems and processes and have all the best documents. And it's like, oh, I have all this amazing equipment and I've done all these things. It's like, but if you're not making enough revenue, let's be honest, you're not doing the right things. If you're stressed out because you don't have enough money in your bank account, you're not having enough conversations, you haven't figured out how to actually enrich your leads enough so when they get on the call, they're just trying to hand you their credit card. If you haven't gotten to that point, you don't actually have you haven't figured out what the main thing is. So for me, it's like I'm just cut out all the fluff. When 4 months ago, when it's like, hey, this is real now. Like I've got to figure this out. I just started doing a bunch of reach outs. and in the beginning, it was a stretch for me to be able to do the amount of reach outs I was doing at the time. And I went, because I've got 5-6 calls a day. I'm sitting there still running a business. I'm married. I have a son. I serve locally here in Tulsa. I'm also serve all the time at our church. And what I realized is what used to be super difficult, I couldn't even do it. Like I could barely get done with those metrics. Now I can do it in an hour and a half, because my mind understands. It's like, oh, that used to be working. That's what I told my wife. I said, what used to be a stretch for me is now just the standard. And I said, so now that I have the standard set, now I have to set a new standard. But the standard is what you will accept. So for me, what does real work look like? It's like if somebody says, man, I did 3 reach outs today, and just one guy was really mean to me, and so I'm just can't do it. I can't do it anymore. It's like, that's not real work yet. It's great. I'm proud of you for starting the work, because it even says that the Lord rejoices in the beginning of a thing, and you have to keep pushing yourself. You show up tomorrow, do 4. Like just keep ramping up until you get to a point where you actually can't go past that point for whatever reason, whatever the process is. Then you can identify another weak link in the actual pipeline of however you're running your business. Because let's say you're doing 100 reach outs a day and you can do that pretty well. Then you scale it up, you're doing 150 and you can still do it and everything's still running well. Then you hit 200. Now you have way too many calls. You can't keep 200 every single day. The quality, you're not able to prep for any calls because you're also the person doing the main sales. You're also the main sales guy too. Now, okay, scale it back to 150. Everything was running fine there. Maybe you hire somebody. Maybe you hire someone. Maybe you find an automated system to go generate those leads, so then you can just be the best salesperson you can. But now over time, I would almost guarantee you've been able to generate enough revenue for you to make choices now. But in the beginning, when you don't have a lot of choices, you just got to work really hard at the thing that's going to make you the most money, which is talking to people. If you're in a service-based business, you got to talk to people, period. And the best way to do that is to find a whole bunch of people in the same industry that you want to service and just talk to them. Because if they aren't interested, they probably know someone who is. And if you're a great person, they're going to be more than willing to open doors. But that's what real work looks like to me, was just figuring out who these people are and just talking to a bunch of people. And then it got to a point where it's like, I don't know if I can talk to all these many people. Okay, great. Let's find a better system. Let's put that in place. Let's get more automations in place. Let's think about hiring someone to do the outreach so you can just focus on being the salesman. Because, also in the beginning, you're going to be the best salesman for your company.
Of course.
Because you know it inside out. This is your baby. You started it. And then down the road, you'll hire another one, so on and so forth. But that's what real work looks like to me.
Yeah, man. I love the perspective. I love the hunger. I love the clarity. I also like, you and I have so many similar parallel journeys, different wrapping paper, but like same thing. And like, you just start to like find the through line of like, oh, this is always the same. Like it looks a little bit different, but like it's always going to be the same. It's just going to be in a different bucket or different wrapping paper.
There's a guy I talked to yesterday. This is for everyone who wants to disagree, but like, no. I have the best product in the world. I've done R&D forever. It's like, this is the best. As soon as I build it, they will absolutely come. Talked to a guy yesterday. He's had his e-commerce store for the last 10 years, and he spent thousands of dollars. I mean, like hundreds of thousands, I would imagine, getting scientists, getting research done for his product, mind you, because it's a health and wellness product. It's a nutritional based beverage for kids. And he was first to market everything. He goes, okay, so I'm first to market. Like, this is going to be fantastic. He spent 3 years building this thing. He makes a Shopify store, launches it. Guess how many sales he got day one? Zero. He ended up actually got one. He said his mom felt bad and bought one. But so he got one. So the thing is he said, I just wish I would have done two things different, which was one, I wish I just would have started selling it before I was ready. And he said, two, I wish I would have been building in public, because then you're getting real market feedback on, does your thing actually matter? And so this is something that a lot of founders I've worked with, especially when they're startups, that they get stuck on, is they just think that their stuff is just the best stuff in the entire world, and they haven't sold that many of it. So it's like, where did you get that from? It's like, that's just something you think because it's yours and you think that everything that's yours is amazing, but the market hasn't given you that feedback. Get a minimum viable product out there, see how the market reacts to it, let them be honest with you and say, hey, this is what I like, this is what I don't like, this is what needs to improve. Then do those things. If you do those things, then you're going to get more sales. It's crazy concept. You go and actually talk to people. If you're a product brand, one of the craziest things is like, what I realize is most people who have a product brand, they just hide behind their screen. They're never on camera. They never make content. They're never talking to people. They just think that they're, I'm good. I want to be a faceless brand. Like, that was the thing that I used to hear all the time. But if you put your face to it and you put your name on it, then that gives people a place for them to give you real feedback. And if you're open to real feedback, your business can iterate so quickly that you can build something from $0 to $1 million in 6 months, in a year, whatever that looks like, because now you just, the rate of change has gone so much faster. The reason why people take so long to get to 7 figures is because they just change so slow. Like, their cycle to change is months and months and months when it could be a week. And if you can shorten those cycles by having real conversations, the hard ones that you don't want to have, everything changes almost overnight.
Yeah. God, there's like, even in that last 2 minutes, there's so much wisdom. And I feel like I have 12, 13 podcast episodes unpacking all of that was just so summarized in a fortune cookie, 1,000%. And also just powerful reminders. So before I forget, because we're getting close to land the plane, I'm going to I'm going to have Steven give his Instagram, because that's where him and I connect. That's where the best place to connect them, because he has a podcast and now he helps business owners, a lot of physical products brands, do all this, and taking that entire roller coaster of a life story of experience and helping navigate it from hiring to scaling to paid media, to systems, to processes, to be able to do this the right way. But where's the best place to connect with you? What's your Instagram, so everybody can shoot you a DM, connect with you, reach out to you?
So Instagram is Stephen K. Pemberton. Look for the dude who looks a little bit like Aquaman. If you find Jason Momoa, that's probably me. Or if you looked up Jason Momoa, that's not me. I'm sorry, I'm not actually Aquaman. But that's the best one. If you can find me there, Instagram's great.
Yeah, I love it. And I would highly recommend it, because I'm sure, as you can tell from listening, he's down to earth, he's humble, he loves helping people. Him and I text all the time, and we'll continue more. And I'm sure there's many things in our future together. At least that's what I'm praying for, at least as we're continuing to find synergies. And so the famous last question I ask everybody is, imagine that everybody listening forgot absolutely everything that you said. They got Men in Blacked and we went hit a race. But in this moment, you have the ability to like tattoo any wisdom on their soul that they'll take with themselves forever. What would your tattoo wisdom be?
So my tattoo of wisdom was be you have more to offer than you think you do. That
Mm.
if I could just summarize in the sentence, you have more to offer than you think you do. And ask yourself that question: what do I have to offer for real? What have I been through for real? And the thing is, if you go back and you look at my story, the only way that I have anything to give right now is because of what I've been through. If I had just read this in the book, I had nothing to offer. But because I've actually been through so many things, I've been through so much in my marriage, I can tell you how to have a healthy, thriving marriage. Because of what I've been through in business, I can tell you what it takes to get from zero to $1 million in a year and what that looks like and how to build real systems because I've been there. But look at the value that you have. What experiences have you experienced and how can you turn around and say, hey, you know what? Let me help you. Because by helping someone else, you're going to inherently help yourself. But value is the biggest thing, is being able to understand who you are intrinsically without anything else, without any transactions, without any of the success, without, if you have a six pack, without the six pack, without the car, without, for me, without the truck. Who are you for real? If you can figure out who you are for real, then the world gets to experience a version of you that it needs. There's people who are waiting on you to be authentically you, and authenticity gets thrown around all the time. For me, it's like, no, just who are you when no one is looking at you? When there's no cameras on, when there's no one around, when it's just you and your dog, how do you show up? Are you still actually that person who's smiling and bubbly and fun? If that's you, then be you all the time. If you're someone where you're a little bit more stern, you're more analytic, you're more to the point, then just be that person all the time. And the thing is there's going to be a dichotomy of people who show up. There's going to be people who they don't like you for being you, and that's okay. And there's going to be another split of those people who they're going to be your tribe forever because you are just like them. So don't do something just focused on you. Focus on other people along the way, and you'll find the people that you need in your darkest moments.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I can't add anything to that except thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this. I'm sure you and I will probably do this hundreds of more times
Let's do
over the
it.
next decade, given the path of our relationship. But, I think for everybody listening, my heart just feels called to say, like, there was so much in this. Like, I have 2 pages of notes to my right just from listening to Steven, and I'm friends with him. And I think the biggest thing is, like, use this as a permission slip and an invitation to take action on one. Whatever it was that tickled, whatever it
Yes.
was that landed the most, like, take action on it. Let today be the day, whether you set some time aside and journal on it, whether you sit down and you're like, holy moly, like, that just spoke to my soul. Like, whatever that thing was, like, you're worth it, and take the action, because the more action that you take, the quicker you're going to get to the results or to the feedback or iterations that you're looking for to be able to achieve the thing that you're setting out to desire. So from me selfishly saying this, reach out to Steven, follow him on Instagram, like, shoot him a DM, connect with him. I have an episode on his show where him and I talked a lot. And so you can go check out his podcast, all of that. Just go straight through his Instagram. Look for the man who looks somewhat similar to Aquaman. I'll give you that. Like, I'll give you that for sure.
Well, you
And
should have
find
seen it
him.
with the long hair. With the long
Yeah.
hair, and I had my beard grown out. I really, it's
Yeah, I
actually
can
pretty
see that.
crazy.
I can see that. I can see that for sure. And so no matter what you do, though, like, just remember that you're worth it. And we started with value and we'll end with value, because there is no other you. And I
Yeah.
think this is just a reminder that all of us get to benefit from, myself included, that you're worth it. And the only way that the world benefits from you being worth it is to share it with the world. And so let this be the reminder, plus a stepping stone, plus a permission slip, and also understanding that entrepreneurship is sure not linear. But as long as you keep going and you put your intentions in the right place and you do it for the right reasons and you focus on the right things, with yourself being at the forefront of it, success is inevitable, but sometimes you just have to keep pushing until you reach that pinnacle. And so
Mm-hmm.
this has been another episode of the Mind of George Show. So you will either see me in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.